Here's the wildest lakeside showdown you'll hear this week. A pair of self-appointed HOA cops rolled a dented white pickup onto our community ramp and used it like a steel gate, trapping boats on shore and holding summer hostage, until my grandpa, a quiet veteran with a barn full of tools and a ledger of old-fashioned receipts, decided to end the blockade with a plan so methodical it turned their truck into a collection of numbered parts and their swagger into silence in front of the whole neighborhood. Before we dive in, a quick ask for the folks who love HOA drama, karma, and property rights victories told with zero fluff. Stick around to the end, tap subscribe, and hit the like button so this channel keeps surfacing stories the gatekeepers would rather bury. Now back to the ramp, the truck, and the afternoon. The bullies learned that rules cut both ways, and the lake belongs to everyone. The story opened like a slow leak that nobody noticed, because early summer always made the lake look forgiving. Families showed up with coolers and sunscreen, the morning fog peeled back like theater curtains, and the ramp, old concrete with veins of river pebbles, waited for the first trailer to hum down. The HOA on paper was nothing ominous. It kept the grass cut, the lights working, and the sign at the trailhead free of graffiti. But the dynamic shifted when two men, not elected and not listed on any committee roster, started wearing radio earpieces and printed polo shirts with a made-up security logo that looked almost official if you blinked. They drove an aging pickup that reeked of cut pine and pride, and they stationed it sideways every weekend across the ramp's mouth, daring anyone to argue. The stated reason changed. Sometimes it was a claimed fish spawning closure, sometimes an unpaid ramp maintenance fee, sometimes a safety protocol because the lake was windy. None of those things existed in the bylaws. Yet they collected folded cash and waved through only the people who flattered them, turning a public use easement into a private toll booth. At first, neighbors tried to negotiate with breezy politeness, believing that reason or a copy of the bylaws would fix it. When politeness failed, frustration grew, then embarrassment, then resignation. People parked farther up the road and carried kayaks like contraband over brush, whispering that it was easier not to stir the pot. The HOA board, a mix of busy parents and retirees, shrugged in emails and said they would address it at the next meeting, which meant nothing on a weekend when the sun was bright and the lake sparkled like a tray of dropped glass marbles. My grandpa watched. The way he watched weather, not with panic but with patterns. He kept notes in a ruled notebook and marked dates, times, and license plates in block letters you could set a ruler to. He read the county easement language like morning prayer. He stood by the ramp and measured property pins with an old tape that still smelled faintly of oil. He didn't talk about what he was doing. He simply gathered facts while the rest of us grumbled and redirected weekend plans. The fake cops grew bolder, blaring a phone siren app at teenagers and planting an orange cone pyramid like a kid's idea of authority. And then one afternoon, when the calendar flipped to the first Saturday of July and the lake filled with dragonflies and laughter, they blocked the ramp so early it caught even early risers off guard. That was the day Grandpa tucked his notebook in his vest pocket, walked the long path to the cul-de-sac, and said it was time to fix the leak that everyone else had learned to live with. The fix did not start with wrenches or wire cutters. It started with notice, which is the quiet cousin of confrontation. He drafted a letter, not to the HOA, but to the County Enforcement Division and the Sheriff's Office, citing the precise paragraph that made the ramp a public use access under a recorded easement that predated most of the houses on our street. He logged every instance of blockage and attached photos of the truck parked across the ramp with timestamps that matched his neat handwriting. He placed a copy of the letter under the HOA board's meeting room door and kept a copy for himself. He did not threaten, argue, or posture. He just documented. When the truck appeared again the next weekend, he added fresh photos, the position of the wheels relative to the survey stakes, the men collecting cash from a folded camp chair, and the stack of cones like an altar to pettiness. The crescendo built, not in a single dramatic scene, but in the way a clock's ticking grows loud in a room where no one will speak. The neighbors noticed Grandpa's calm like a wind shift that carries rain. They started forwarding him their own photos and notes. The file thickened. And that's how the first chapter ended. With a sense that a posture had met its match in a person who preferred process to noise, and a summer that refused to be bullied, whispering that the real storm was still offshore. The second chapter began when heat made the road shimmer, and tempers simmered too close to the surface. The men with the truck added a fake citation pad to their props, tearing off slips and sticking them under windshield wipers of anyone who questioned them, as if paper alone could summon the law. They announced a holiday surcharge, and the ramp turned into a parade of humiliation. Kids stood with life vests on, watching adults argue while the truck idled, coughing circles of smoke into the blue air. Grandpa waited. Waiting for him was crafting, not stalling. He compiled the neighbors' testimonies and stacked them with his own. He printed the most damning pages of the bylaws and highlighted the places where authority was clear. The HOA had no policing function. The ramp's easement allowed uninterrupted access during daylight, and any obstruction was prohibited. He carried the packet to a county office that smelled like dust and copier ozone and asked a clerk to stamp it. A case number clicked into being, impersonal and beautiful. Armed with that number, he returned to the ramp and set a small folding stool 20 feet back from the truck. He didn't confront, he observed. He didn't chase, he recorded. And then he did something that felt like pulling a thread from a sweater. He measured the time the truck sat with no driver, 40 minutes, then an hour, then longer, while the HOA cops wandered to a shaded picnic table to lecture newcomers about rules they invented on the spot. He looked at the county code about abandoned vehicles on public access sites when they obstruct ingress or egress and compared it to the easement language. Two gears that didn't seem to touch suddenly meshed. He photographed again, time-stamped again, and wrote the words, "abandoned while obstructing, driver absent" in the margin. The fake cops returned to their truck and revved it like a punctuation mark, and Grandpa wrote, "driver returned," with equal calm. He was building more than a scrapbook. He was building a mechanism. The pivot arrived on a Sunday morning when a thunderstorm rolled through at dawn and scrubbed the air clean. The men overplayed their hand, parking the truck, opening the hood as if broken down, and leaving it across the ramp while they drove off in a second car for coffee, and by the time stamp, well over 2 hours. Kayakers gathered and stared at the empty cab like museum visitors. Grandpa nodded once, the kind of nod that doesn't say "I'm about to act" so much as "the work is done." He called the county non-emergency line, recited the case number, the code about obstruction at a public use easement, and the evidence of abandonment. He let the weight of the paperwork do the talking. A deputy arrived, a tow followed, and the truck was hooked by noon. The HOA cops screamed into the lot 20 minutes too late, faces blanching at the sight of their throne lifted on chains, while neighbors watched like a block party. But that was not the end. In fact, that was the break that ushered in the next turn of the plan. Because with the tow came a bill, and with the bill came panic. And with panic came a rash decision that would gift Grandpa the leverage he needed. The third chapter opened with the truck back at the ramp the very next weekend. This time parked legally for an hour as if to prove a point, then pivoted sideways again once the deputy left. The men, wounded by the tow fee, announced that there would be back charges for anyone launching that day, and their voices rose to that brittle pitch people use when they know they're wrong but can't bear it. Grandpa waited in the shade, reading the county receipt for the tow with the kind of attention a jeweler gives to a flawed stone. The receipt showed the registered owner's name, and the name didn't match either man. The truck was loaned, borrowed, or something even sloppier. He checked the lien status through a public lookup. The truck had an outstanding mechanic's lien pending from a small shop 2 towns over, which meant the vehicle's legal footing was a splintered dock. He made 2 calls, one to the shop, politely confirming that their lien notice had gone unanswered, and one to the county again, extending his case file with the status update that the obstructing vehicle was also subject to unresolved claims. He wasn't setting a trap. He was illuminating the ground they had chosen to stand on. The men escalated, perhaps sensing the ice thinning under their boots. They left the truck with the hood up as if disabled again and disappeared for half a day. This was different from a coffee run. It looked like a dare. Grandpa accepted it not with a bolt cutter, but with a pen. He filed a request for immediate removal under obstruction and abandonment, provided the lien information, and, crucially, attached a sworn statement from 3 neighbors that the vehicle had blocked ingress for more than 4 hours with no responsible party present. The tow company came faster this time. The men returned as the chains tightened, demanded release, and were ignored. They followed the tow truck like angry kites. And then, over the next week, a small miracle of bureaucracy unfolded. The registered owner never paid the fees. The men, not owners, could not. The shop with the lien, tired of chasing a ghost, signed a release in exchange for the balance of its bill, which the tow yard wanted before storage eclipsed the vehicle's value. Grandpa, advised by a friend at the marina who'd watched countless titles go from messy to clean, negotiated. He paid the shop's small balance and the tow yard's fees out of a fund he kept for emergencies that most people would call petty cash, and he called peace money. The truck, once a throne, became a titleable piece of property, and then a titled one with his name on it. That was the moment the story completed in spirit, because control returned to the community, and the men's authority evaporated. The ramp was clear the next weekend, and the lake welcomed boats like a patient mother whose kids finally stopped picking at each other. The chapter closed with the truck sitting quietly behind Grandpa's barn under a canvas tarp, and the neighborhood feeling both vindicated and curious about what would happen next. The fourth act unfolded like a long exhale, and then a grin. Grandpa did not drive the truck, not even once. He rolled it into the barn and drew chalk lines on the floor around it like a tailor measuring cloth. He tagged each major component with a paper label and a length of string. He called a few friends, not to crow, but to ask who needed what. The exhaust went to a neighbor whose work truck had been bellowing like a bull. The alternator found a home in a fishing buddy's van. The bedliner, cut cleanly at the corners, became a durable floor for a shed where a young couple stored kayaks. He posted the rear tires on a local board at cost and handed the cash to the HOA treasurer, specifically earmarked for ramp maintenance, with a receipt that made half the board blush and the other half laugh. He kept the tailgate, polished it, and turned it into a bench that faced the lake from the shaded edge of the park, a place where kids could tie laces and skippers could retie lines. The point was not humiliation. The point was transformation. The men with the earpieces came by twice, each time pretending they were just passing through, and saw parts of their old perch soldered into the life of the place they tried to control. They said nothing, because there was nothing to say that didn't taste like crow. The board, awakened by the sound of consequences, finally read its own bylaws aloud and passed a resolution clarifying that no member, committee, or contractor could obstruct the ramp except during officially posted repairs vetted by the county. A laminated copy of the easement and contact info for the rightful stewards went up on the park's corkboard. The lake returned to itself. And if this chapter had an image, it would have been Grandpa on the tailgate bench at dusk, ledger closed, watching the pink band of sunset settle on water that no longer needed an advocate, at least not that week. The fifth and final stretch was not revenge so much as repair. The board invited neighbors to a meeting that for once felt like a meeting, not a ritual. They asked Grandpa to speak. He did briefly, explaining that power is not a voice you raise but a record you keep, and that the law works best when it's asked politely to do its job. He donated the remaining truck parts revenue to a fund labeled Access and Safety, and a teenager with a knack for carpentry led a Saturday project to install new cleats and a rubber edge on the ramp so trailers wouldn't chip their paint. The fake cops' shirts vanished. The earpieces got tucked into junk drawers. The cones, cracked and sun-faded, were stacked behind the shed as a reminder that props don't make policy. The lake, unbothered by human drama, kept being a lake, and that was the whole point. By the time the tailgate bench had weathered its first thunderstorm and gone smooth to the touch, the story had become a lesson told to newcomers with a chuckle. That one summer, two guys tried to turn a public ramp into a private stage, and an old man with a notebook turned their truck into a bench for the kids who now jump from it into a future where access belongs to everyone. And if you listen closely on quiet evenings, you can still hear the soft click of a camera phone's shutter, the scratch of a pen on paper, and the clink of a socket wrench, each sound small on its own, together composing the chorus that reclaimed a shoreline without a single shouted word. If you enjoyed this no drama, all receipts takedown of petty power, help this channel reach more neighbors who need it by tapping subscribe and hitting like right now. Drop a comment with the wildest HOA or property saga from your town, and share this with the one person who swears that's just how things are. More stories are on the way, and you don't want to miss the next time someone tries it and learns the lake has a long memory.